She had nothing left to offer. The offer stunned him, a stranger's door. The rain fell with such ferocity that Maya could barely make out the gravel road behind her. Each droplet felt like ice against her skin, seeping through the threadbare fabric of her jacket until her clothes became a second skin of cold misery. Her shoes, more holes than leather now, squelched with each painful step. Her legs ached from walking, but the physical pain paled in comparison to the gnawing hunger and the crushing weight of hopelessness that had become her constant companions. She found herself standing before a weathered farmhouse on the outskirts of a town whose name she'd never bothered to learn. The porch light cast a warm, golden glow across the wooden steps, creating a beacon of hope in the storm. Maya had nothing left. No money jingling in empty pockets, no friends to call, no family to turn to. Just a body that refused to give up, and an instinct to survive that burned stronger than her shame. With trembling fingers, she knocked. The door creaked open after what felt like an eternity. A man appeared in the doorframe, tall, with hands that spoke of hard work and skin weathered by years under the sun. His dark hair showed touches of premature gray, and his eyes held a mixture of suspicion and exhaustion, though they remained clear and alert. "Yes?" His voice was low, cautious. Maya's lips trembled as she struggled to find words. I don't have anywhere to go." His gaze swept over her, soaked, shivering, small against the storm. She watched his face, seeing the exact moment he almost closed the door, and then the moment he chose not to. Looking up at him through rain-soaked eyelashes, she whispered, "I can work, or whatever else you need." His jaw tightened visibly. "I'm not interested in that kind of arrangement," he said firmly. "But I don't turn people away in a storm." Maya didn't believe him. Not really. How could she? But when he stepped aside and gestured for her to enter, she followed without hesitation. The house embraced her with the scent of firewood and old paper. It was clean but simple, with modest furniture, a few family photographs on the walls, and shelves lined with well-worn books. He handed her a towel, its softness foreign against her rough palms, and pointed toward the hallway. "There's a bathroom. Through there. You can take a hot shower. I'll leave some clothes by the door." She hesitated, searching his face for hidden motives. "Why are you helping me?" His answer was simple, honest. "Because you asked." That night, for the first time in weeks, Maya slept in a real bed. She lay awake for hours, half expecting him to sneak into the room, but he never did. His name was Eli, she learned. A carpenter by trade, quiet by nature, who had lived alone since his wife's death 5 years prior. No children, no gossip following him around the small town. His days followed a simple rhythm: work during daylight hours, return home to read, in the evenings by lamplight. He never asked questions she wasn't ready to answer, never pushed for explanations she couldn't give. Maya stayed. On the third day, desperation still clinging to her like morning fog, she offered herself again. Not because she wanted to, but because it was the only currency she'd ever known. Eli shook his head gently, his refusal kind but firm. "I'm not looking to buy anything," he said. "Especially not people." So instead, she found other ways to contribute. She cleaned the house until it sparkled, washed dishes with careful attention, helped tend the small garden behind the house, and cooked when she could remember how her grandmother used to prepare simple meals. Days melted into weeks, and Eli gave her something she'd never experienced before: space, trust, and a home that didn't demand a price for her presence. Slowly, like a flower turning toward the sun, Maya began to believe she wasn't just a burden. One afternoon, while Eli sanded a cabinet in his workshop, she gathered the courage to ask, "Why do you live out here all alone?" He looked up from his work, wood shavings clinging to his shirt. "I used to live in the city. After my wife died, I couldn't breathe there anymore. You loved her." "I still do." Maya fell quiet for a moment, then said softly, "No one's ever loved me like that." Eli paused in his sanding, meeting her eyes. "Maybe they didn't know how. Doesn't mean you're not worthy of it." She didn't answer, but something deep in her chest cracked open, not breaking but beginning to heal. As summer rolled in with its warm breezes and longer days, Maya began to change. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since she was 16 and still believed in dreams. Eli found her one morning on the back porch, brush in hand, color streaking across a canvas she'd built from scrap wood. "That's beautiful," he said simply. "I used to be good at this," she whispered, almost ashamed of the admission. "You still are." Her cheeks flushed with something warmer than embarrassment. Pride, perhaps, or hope beginning to take root. Maya began helping Eli with his carpentry business, managing phone calls, organizing orders, even learning to use his woodworking tools with steady, careful hands. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was learning what it meant to truly live. But peace, she discovered, has a way of attracting the past like a magnet draws iron. His name was Darren, her ex, the man who had introduced her to sleeping in strangers' beds in exchange for shelter and money. The one who had taken her identification, her bank cards, her dignity, and then vanished like smoke when things got complicated. Somehow he found her at the local farmer's market, where she was laughing as she picked wildflowers for the kitchen table. "Maya," he drawled, as if they were old friends meeting for coffee. "Heard you were hiding out in some old guy's barn." She froze, the flowers falling from nerveless fingers. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. "You're not safe here without me," he said, his voice carrying that familiar mix of false concern and veiled threat. "You know that." That night she sat across from Eli at the kitchen table, her voice steady but her heart breaking. "I'll leave. I won't bring that darkness back into your life." Eli didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. "You're not leaving." "But he knows where I am now." "Then let him come," Eli said, his voice carrying a steel she'd never heard before. "He'll find out he's not welcome." A week passed in tense quiet. Then, too, Maya started laughing again, started believing that maybe her past couldn't reach her here. But she never felt fully safe until the night she heard a truck rumbling up the gravel drive at midnight, followed by a knock, heavy, demanding, threatening. Eli was already at the door when she reached him. As if he'd been expecting this moment, Darren stood there drunk and smirking, his presence like a poison in the clean night air. "You think you can keep her?" Darren slurred. "She's not something to be kept," Eli replied evenly. "She's mine." "No," Maya said firmly, stepping into the light behind Eli, finding her voice and her strength. "I was never yours." Darren's smile faded, replaced by something uglier, more dangerous. "You think this old man's going to protect you?" Eli's voice dropped low and hard. "I don't need to fight you, but I will if I have to." Darren hadn't expected the shotgun that appeared from behind the door. He left for good, his truck disappearing into the darkness like a bad dream finally ending. The next morning, Maya stood in the garden with hands that trembled but a heart that felt strangely calm. Eli brought her coffee, standing beside her in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of hope. She turned to him, words spilling out like water from a broken dam. "I came here with nothing. I offered you my body because it was the only thing anyone ever wanted from me, and you gave me something I didn't even know how to ask for." Eli met her eyes, his gaze steady and warm. "You deserved better. I just made space for you to find it." She took his hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit with hers. "Can I stay?" she asked, her voice soft with vulnerability and hope. "You already have," he said. The seasons changed again, bringing autumn's golden beauty and winter's quiet peace. Maya began volunteering at a local shelter, helping women escape the life she had once lived. She spoke softly, but carried a strength that made others lean in to listen, drawn to the authenticity of someone who had walked through darkness and found light. She painted more, selling her art in the town's little gallery. Her name began to mean something more than just her past. It became synonymous with resilience, with beauty born from ashes. Eli built her a studio in the back of the property, complete with large windows that filled the space with sunlight and walls that carried the sweet scent of fresh pine wood. When she saw it for the first time, she cried tears of joy and disbelief. "You built me a dream," she whispered. "No," Eli replied, pulling her close. "You built it. I just gave it walls." One chilly October evening, as leaves tumbled down like golden memories, she stood in front of the fireplace holding a small velvet box in her hands. "I never thought I'd want this," she said, her eyes damp with emotion. "But I do. Not because I need a husband, not because I need saving, but because I want to build the rest of my life with you." Eli opened the box to find a ring she'd carved, herself from wood, smooth and delicate like her new life had become. "I've been ready," he said, his voice warm with love and certainty. They didn't need a big wedding with crowds and ceremony, just a sunrise, a promise, and the home they'd built together with their own hands and hearts. The vows they spoke were simple but profound, witnessed only by the morning sky and the trees that had sheltered their love as it grew. 1 year later, Maya stood in her studio, painting sunlight with hands that were steady and sure. Her heart felt full in a way she'd never imagined possible. Outside, she could hear Eli building a treehouse for the foster child they'd taken in, a quiet girl with eyes that reminded Maya of her younger self, full of wariness but beginning to hope. The house was still small, still quiet in its own way, but now it pulsed with life and laughter. There were no locks on the inside doors anymore, no need for barriers between hearts that had chosen to trust. Maya no longer traded pieces of herself to stay warm, because she had finally learned what it meant to be truly sheltered by love. This was what it meant to be loved without conditions, without price, without shame. She had once given herself away for a place to sleep. But this man, this beautiful, patient man, had given her a life worth waking up to. As she painted, Maya smiled, knowing that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the words, "I have nothing left to offer," because that's when love steps in and says, "You already have everything I need." 3 years had passed since that storm-soaked night when Maya first knocked on Eli's door. The small farmhouse had transformed into something neither of them had imagined, a sanctuary not just for themselves, but for others who needed a second chance at life. The foster child they'd taken in, 12-year-old Emma, had slowly begun to bloom under their patient care. Like Maya once had, Emma arrived with walls built high around her heart, expecting rejection at every turn. But Eli's steady presence and Maya's understanding of what it meant to feel unwanted worked a quiet magic. "She reminds me of myself," Maya told Eli one evening as they watched Emma tentatively approach the easel Maya had set up for her in the studio. All that pain, but still hoping someone might see something worth saving. Eli wrapped his arms around his wife from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You see it because you've been there. That's why you're exactly what she needs." Maya leaned into his warmth, still marveling at how natural this felt. Being held without fear, loved without conditions. "Sometimes I think about that night when I stood on your porch with nothing. If someone had told me I'd be here, married, helping other people heal, I wouldn't have believed them." "But you would have hoped," Eli said softly. "That's what I saw in your eyes that first night. Hope, even when you thought you'd lost everything." The shelter work had grown too. What started as Maya volunteering a few hours a week had evolved into a full program. She'd convinced the town council to let her convert an old building near the center of town into a proper transitional house for women escaping dangerous situations. Eli had donated his carpentry skills, and slowly, other townspeople had joined the cause. Maya found herself becoming someone she'd never thought possible. A leader, an advocate, a voice for those who couldn't speak for themselves. She testified at county meetings, spoke to church groups, and even traveled to neighboring towns to share her story. Each time she spoke, she felt the last chains of her past falling away. "The thing about rock bottom," she would tell the women who came through their doors, "is that it gives you a solid foundation to build on. Everything you create from here is yours by choice, not circumstance." Emma's progress was slow but steady. She'd started speaking more at dinner, even laughing at Eli's terrible jokes. She'd painted her first picture, a house with warm light, glowing from the windows and 3 figures standing on the porch. When Maya found it, she had to sit down and cry for 10 minutes. "That's us," Emma had said quietly when she found Maya looking at the painting. "That's home." That night, as Maya and Eli sat on their own porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, she felt a deep contentment settle over her like a favorite blanket. "I never thought I'd have this," she said, gesturing to the life they'd built around them. "A home, a purpose, someone who loves me for who I am, not what I can do for them." Eli took her hand, his thumb tracing over the wooden ring she still wore alongside her simple gold wedding band. "You were always worthy of this, Maya. You just needed someone to hold space for you while you figured that out." The transitional house had been open for 6 months, and already they'd helped 14 women find their footing again. Each success story felt like a small miracle to Maya, a confirmation that her own pain hadn't been meaningless. Sarah was the first woman who reminded Maya so much of herself that it was almost painful to watch. She'd arrived in the middle of winter, pregnant and running from a man who'd made her believe she was nothing without him. Like Maya once had, she'd offered to earn her keep in ways that broke Maya's heart. "You don't owe us anything," Maya had told her gently, the same way Eli had once told her. "You just need to focus on getting well and figuring out what you want your life to look like." It took weeks for Sarah to believe it, but slowly she began to trust. Maya taught her to paint, finding that the same therapy that had helped her heal worked for others too. There was something about putting color on canvas that helped women rediscover the parts of themselves they'd lost. Eli had started a woodworking program for any of the women who were interested. "Hands need something productive to do while hearts are healing," he'd say, patiently teaching someone how to sand a piece of wood smooth or measure twice before cutting. The program caught the attention of a reporter from the state capitol, who wrote a feature story about their work. The article brought donations, volunteers, and more women who needed help. It also brought recognition that Maya found both gratifying and overwhelming. "Small-town woman turns personal tragedy into community triumph," the headline read. Maya had mixed feelings about being called a triumph, but she couldn't argue with the results. The article had generated enough donations to expand their services and hire a part-time counselor. Emma, now 13 and more confident, had become an unofficial ambassador for their cause. She would help new arrivals feel welcome, sharing her own story when appropriate and proving to scared children that it was possible to feel safe again. "Miss Maya saved me," she told one particularly frightened 8-year-old who'd arrived with her mother. "But she says I saved myself. She just gave me the tools." Watching Emma comfort another child, Maya felt her heart swell with pride and love. This was what healing looked like, not just surviving your own trauma, but using it to help others survive theirs. The farmhouse itself had undergone changes too. Eli had built an addition, creating more space for their growing family. They'd officially adopted Emma the previous spring, and she'd asked if she could change her last name to match theirs. The day they signed the papers, all 3 of them had cried happy tears, but perhaps the most significant change was in Maya herself. The woman who had once knocked on Eli's door believing she had nothing to offer now stood before audiences of hundreds, sharing her story with confidence and grace. She'd started writing too, working on a book about her journey from desperation to hope. "I want other women to know," she told Eli as she worked on her manuscript late one evening, "that their worth isn't determined by their worst moments. That love, real love, doesn't require payment or performance. It just requires showing up as yourself." Eli read over her shoulder, his presence a comforting constant. "You're going to help so many people with this," he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "We're going to help them," Maya corrected. "None of this would have happened without you believing in me first." 5 years after that stormy night, Maya stood in the largest venue she'd ever spoken at, a conference center in the state capitol filled with social workers, counselors, and advocates. Her book, Sheltered, Finding Home in Unexpected Places, had become a bestseller, and she was now in demand as a speaker across the region. But success hadn't changed the fundamentals of her life. She still lived in the same farmhouse with Eli, still ran the transitional house, still painted in the studio he'd built for her. Emma, now 16, had become an accomplished artist in her own right and was already talking about studying social work in college. "I want to do what you do, Mom," she told Maya recently. The word mom still made Maya's heart skip a beat, even after all this time. Standing at the podium looking out at hundreds of faces, Maya felt the familiar flutter of nerves she always experienced before speaking. Then she spotted Eli in the third row, Emma beside him, and Sarah, now a successful entrepreneur who ran her own small business, in the front. Her chosen family, supporting her as they always did. 6 years ago, Maya began, her voice clear and strong. "I stood on a stranger's porch with nothing left to offer. I was convinced that my only value lay in what I could do for others, how I could make myself useful enough to earn basic human decency." The room was silent, hundreds of people leaning forward to hear her story. I knocked on that door, expecting to have to trade pieces of my soul for a place to sleep. Instead, I found a man who taught me that love doesn't come with conditions, that home isn't something you earn, it's something you build, together. She told them about Eli's quiet kindness, about learning to see her own worth, about the long journey from victim to survivor to someone who could help others heal. She spoke about Emma, about the transitional house, about the ripple effects of one person choosing compassion over judgment. "The most radical thing that man did," Maya said, her voice growing stronger with each word, "was to see me as a human being worthy of basic dignity, no strings attached. He didn't try to fix me or save me. He just made space for me to fix myself." After her talk, a young woman approached her, maybe 20, with eyes that Maya recognized all too well. The look of someone who'd been told she was worthless for so long that she'd started to believe it. "I don't know if I can do what you did," the girl whispered. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Maya took her hands gently. "Strength isn't something you have or don't have. It's something you build, one choice at a time. And you've already made the hardest choice. You're here, you're listening, you're believing that maybe there's something better out there for you." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "What if no one wants to help someone like me?" "Someone like you helped me," Maya said softly. "Every person who's ever stood up and said, 'This isn't the end of my story,' makes it easier for the next person to believe in possibility. You're not just saving yourself, you're saving the next person who needs to hear that it's possible." Later, in the hotel room, Maya sat with Eli and Emma, feeling the deep satisfaction that came from meaningful work. "You know what I'm proudest of?" Eli said, pulling both his wife and daughter close. "What's that?" Maya asked. "That girl tonight, she didn't just hear your story, she heard hope, and tomorrow, she'll go home and make different choices because of it." Emma nodded seriously. "It's like throwing stones in a pond. The ripples keep going and going." Maya smiled, thinking about all the ripples their little family had created. The women who'd found safety in their transitional house, the children who'd learned they were worthy of love, the community that had rallied around a cause that mattered. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life," she admitted. "That night when I knocked on your door, if someone had told me I'd be here, you'd have thought they were crazy," Eli finished with a chuckle. "But I would have hoped they were." "Right?" Maya said, echoing the words he'd spoken to her years ago. The 10th anniversary of Maya's first night at the farmhouse called for celebration, though Maya preferred to mark it quietly. The transitional house now served as a model for similar programs across 3 states. Emma had just graduated high school as valedictorian and was headed to college in the fall, planning to study both social work and art therapy. "I want to paint with kids who've been through trauma," she'd explained to her parents. "Help them find their voices the way you helped me find mine." The farmhouse had become something of a pilgrimage site for people who'd read Maya's book or heard her speak. They would drive out from town just to see the place where such transformation had begun, though Maya and Eli were always careful to maintain their privacy and the peaceful sanctuary they'd created. On this particular evening, Maya sat in her studio working on her second book. This one focused on the practical aspects of healing and building community support systems. Through the window, she could see Eli in his workshop, still crafting beautiful pieces of furniture with the same patient attention to detail that had first won her heart. A knock at the front door interrupted her thoughts. Maya was surprised to find a woman about her own age standing there, well-dressed but with something fragile in her posture. "Are you Maya?" the woman asked hesitantly. "Yes, how can I help you?" "My name is Rebecca. I read your book. I drove here from 3 states away because I had to tell you something." Maya invited her in, brewing tea as Rebecca gathered her courage to speak. 15 years ago, I was in a situation similar to what you described," Rebecca began. "I had a daughter Emma's age now. I was trapped with a man who hurt us both and I didn't see any way out." Maya listened, her heart already understanding where this story was headed. "One night I saw your interview on television. You were talking about how it's never too late to choose a different story for yourself. You said that asking for help isn't weakness, it's the strongest thing you can do." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "I called the domestic violence hotline that night. It took me 6 more months to actually leave, but that was the night I started believing it was possible." "Where are you now?" Maya asked gently. "I have my own business, a small catering company. My daughter just graduated college. She's a teacher now. We have a good life, a safe life. And it started the night I heard you say that I deserved better." Maya felt the familiar tightness in her throat that came when she realized how far-reaching the ripples of healing could travel. "But here's why I really came," Rebecca continued. "Last month my daughter told me she's been volunteering at a women's shelter in her city. She said she does it because she grew up watching me help other women who were trying to leave dangerous situations. She learned from watching me that we have a responsibility to help each other." Maya had to set down her teacup. Her hands were shaking so much. "Do you see?" Rebecca asked. "Your story saved me. My healing taught my daughter. She's now helping women I'll never meet. The circle just keeps growing." After Rebecca left, Maya walked out to Eli's workshop, needing to share this moment with the person who'd started it all. "That could have been you," Eli said after she'd told him about Rebecca's visit. "Standing on someone else's porch, desperate for help." "But it wasn't," Maya replied. "Because I found you. Because you chose to see a person instead of a problem." Eli set down his tools and pulled her into his arms. "We found each other," he corrected. "And look what we built together." Through the workshop window, they could see Emma in the house, video calling with other young adults who'd grown up in foster care. She'd started an online support group for kids who'd aged out of the system, sharing resources and encouragement. "She's going to change the world," Maya said, watching their daughter with fierce pride. "She already is," Eli replied. "Just like her mother,